"Excuse me, miss. The cleaning staff entrance is in the back." Dr. Richard Pemberton didn't even look up from his conference badge when he dismissed the black woman standing near the registration desk. His voice carried that particular tone, polite enough to avoid confrontation, condescending enough to make his assumptions clear. Dr. Amara Sterling adjusted the strap of her leather portfolio bag and met his eyes with unsettling calm. "I'm registered for the conference." Pemberton's smile was practiced, the kind perfected over decades of medical conferences where everyone looked like him. "I'm sure there's been some confusion. This is the International Cardiac Surgery Summit. Registration fees are $3,000. What he didn't know was that the woman he'd just mistaken for housekeeping staff had revolutionized cardiac surgery in ways that would be announced in exactly 47 minutes. But first, she'd have to survive the next conversation. Have you ever been so completely underestimated that people couldn't see the expertise standing right in front of them? These real-life stories, these black stories, that expose how bias blinds even the most educated professionals. They're touching stories that remind us credentials mean nothing when prejudice clouds judgment. The grand ballroom of the Seattle Convention Center buzzed with 1,200 cardiac surgeons from 43 countries. It was November 12th, and the summit represented the pinnacle of cardiovascular medicine. Physicians who held human hearts in their hands, who made life and death decisions in milliseconds, who published in the most prestigious journals, and not one of them, not a single attendee walking past registration, thought the elegantly dressed black woman in the tailored charcoal suit belonged there. Amara had experienced this particular brand of discrimination 847 times in her 15-year career. She'd stopped counting after residency, but the number lived in her mind like scar tissue. Each incident had taught her something valuable. Never react immediately. Document everything, and wait for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. "Miss," Pemberton repeated, his patience wearing theatrical and thin, "I need to ask you to step aside. You're blocking registered attendees." The security guard stationed near the entrance began walking over, his hand already moving toward his radio. Amara recognized the body language. She'd seen it in hospital hallways, in academic conferences, in professional spaces where her presence was perpetually questioned. But what happened next would transform this moment of casual racism into a case study taught in medical schools across 3 continents. "Dr. Pemberton," Amara said quietly, reading his conference badge with deliberate precision. "Chief of Cardiology, Boston Memorial. I read your recent paper on mitral valve repair. The methodology was solid, though I noticed some statistical limitations in your patient cohort selection." Pemberton's eyes widened slightly. The security guard paused mid-step. How do you know my work?" "I review submissions for the Journal of Thoracic Surgery," Amara replied, opening her portfolio to reveal her conference materials. "I'm also registered for this summit. Seat B7, third row center, reserved for keynote speakers." The color drained from Pemberton's face faster than blood, evacuating a punctured ventricle. The registration coordinator, Jennifer Liu, had been watching the exchange with growing alarm. She rushed over with a tablet, her professional smile cracking at the edges. "Dr. Sterling, I'm so sorry for any confusion. We've been expecting you. Your presentation materials were delivered to the main stage an hour ago." Pemberton looked from Jennifer to Amara, his brain struggling to reconcile his assumptions with emerging reality. "Dr. Sterling? As in, Dr. Amara Sterling?" "The same," Amara confirmed, accepting her conference badge from Jennifer's trembling hands. The security guard had stopped completely now, recognizing that something significant was unfolding. Other attendees slowed their conversations, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure that precedes a storm. Because Dr. Amara Sterling wasn't just another conference attendee. She was the surgeon who had developed the Sterling Protocol, a revolutionary minimally invasive technique for repairing complex congenital heart defects that had reduced mortality rates by 73% and cut recovery times in half. She was the youngest person ever awarded the Denton Cooley Award for cardiovascular innovation. She held 14 patents on surgical instruments and techniques. She'd performed over 2,000 successful cardiac surgeries with a complication rate 89% below the national average. and Dr. Richard Pemberton had just told her to use the service entrance. Pemberton's voice emerged as a hoarse whisper. I had no idea. I thought the cleaning staff usually wears similar what? Amara asked, her tone still perfectly calm. Professional attire? A tailored suit? Or did you mean similar skin color? The question hung in the air like a scalpel suspended over tissue. Attendees within earshot stopped pretending not to listen. Phones emerged from pockets, some recording, others texting colleagues inside the ballroom. Jennifer Liu looked like she wanted the floor to open and swallow her registration desk. Dr. Sterling, please, if there's anything we can do to make up for this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, Amara repeated, savoring the word like a diagnosis. Is that what we're calling it? But Amara Sterling hadn't come to Seattle to educate one biased cardiologist. She'd come to revolutionize an entire field. And in 34 minutes, everyone in that ballroom would understand exactly who they'd been dismissing. The conference organizer, Dr. Helena Vasquez, appeared with the urgency of someone responding to a code blue. Her Bluetooth earpiece blinked frantically as she assessed the situation with practiced efficiency. Dr. Sterling, I apologize profusely for any inconvenience. Dr. Pemberton, perhaps you'd like to personally escort our keynote speaker to the VIP lounge? Pemberton looked like a man who'd accidentally clamped the wrong artery. Of course, Dr. Sterling, I sincerely apologize. I didn't recognize. You didn't ask, Amara interrupted gently. You assumed. There's a difference. She turned to face the small crowd that had gathered, drawn by the electromagnetic pull of conflict in professional spaces. 23 physicians, all credentialed, all educated, all watching a black woman assert her authority in a field that had spent decades trying to keep people who looked like her out. How many of you? Amara asked the assembled group, her voice carrying the practiced projection of someone accustomed to operating theater acoustics, have published research in the past year. Hands rose tentatively. 12 of the 23. How many have performed experimental procedures approved by institutional review boards? 4 hands remained. How many have developed techniques currently being taught in medical schools? Only 1 hand stayed up. Dr. Kenji Tanaka from Tokyo, whose work on robotic-assisted valve replacement Amara had cited in her own research. And how many, she continued, immediately assumed I was janitorial staff based solely on how I look. The silence was absolute. This was the moment when bias met consequence, when assumptions collided with reality, when the stories we tell ourselves about strangers shatter against the truth. Amara's phone vibrated against her hip. She glanced at the screen. A text from Dr. Michael Chen, Chief of Surgery at Seattle Presbyterian, the hospital hosting this conference. Conference Room C is ready for the pre-keynote briefing. Also, we need to talk about your other announcement. Pemberton noticed her checking the message. Dr. Sterling, again, I cannot apologize enough. If there's any way I can, actually, Amara interrupted, tucking her phone away. There is something you can do. Attend my keynote. Pay attention to the data, and then ask yourself how many other brilliant physicians you've dismissed because they didn't match your mental image of what expertise looks like. She turned to Dr. Vasquez. I'll need 15 minutes before we begin. The presentation includes live surgical footage that requires content warnings. Vasquez nodded eagerly, desperate to move past the registration disaster. Of course. We've arranged everything according to your specifications. As Amara walked toward the VIP lounge, she heard the whispers erupting behind her like post-operative complications. Phones were out now, Wikipedia pages being frantically refreshed, Google Scholar searches multiplying. Because once you know you've just dismissed one of the world's leading cardiac surgeons, the only question becomes, what else don't you know about her? Dr. Michael Chen stood when Amara entered Conference Room C. Beside him sat 3 other individuals who made Pemberton's embarrassment look like a minor procedural error. Margaret Whitmore, CEO of American Medical Systems, the largest hospital network in North America. Her company operated 247 hospitals across 38 states. David Park, editor-in-chief of The Lancet, whose editorial decisions shaped global medical practice, and Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, Surgeon General of the United States, whose presence at any medical conference signaled federal-level significance. Amara, Chen began, his Korean-American accent softened by decades in Seattle. We have a situation. I'm aware, Amara replied, setting her portfolio on the conference table. Dr. Pemberton's assumptions are already circulating on medical Twitter. I'm trending, apparently. Whitmore leaned forward. Dr. Sterling, we need to address this carefully. Boston Memorial is a major system partner. Pemberton chairs their cardiac department. If this becomes a public relations issue, it's already a public relations issue, Amara interrupted calmly. The question is whether we use it for institutional change or damage control. Park consulted his tablet. Your keynote presentation, the Sterling Protocol outcomes data, is set to revolutionize congenital cardiac surgery. But if we lead with the registration incident, we risk overshadowing the science with social politics. Social politics, Amara repeated, her tone sharpening microscopically. Is that what we call racism when it happens to black physicians at medical conferences? Surgeon General Okonkwo smiled slightly, the expression of someone who'd navigated identical waters. Dr. Sterling raises a valid point. We can't separate the science from the systemic barriers that almost prevented her from presenting it. Chen pulled up a video on the conference room monitor. Security footage from registration. Time-stamped 8:47 a.m. Crystal clear video of Pemberton dismissing Amara, the security guard approaching, the crowd gathering. This footage, Chen said carefully, is being requested by 3 major news networks, 4 medical journals, and 7 diversity advocacy organizations. What happens next sets precedent. Amara studied the frozen image on screen, her own face, perfectly composed even as discrimination unfolded in real time. She'd learned that expression during residency, when attending physicians questioned her orders, during fellowship, when patients requested a real doctor, during her first cardiac surgery, when the anesthesiologist asked if she was lost. Here's what happens next, Amara said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who holds beating hearts in her hands. I deliver my keynote exactly as planned. I present the Sterling Protocol data that proves minimally invasive congenital repair works. Then I announce the second initiative. Whitmore frowned. Second initiative. Chen nodded slowly. The Diversity Tracking Program. Exactly, Amara confirmed. For the past 18 months, I've been documenting discrimination incidents in cardiac surgery across North America. Survey data from 1,447 physicians of color, statistical analysis of promotion rates, publication acceptance, surgical opportunity allocation, and patient bias incidents. She opened her portfolio and distributed bound reports to each person at the table. The Sterling Protocol solves a medical problem, Amara continued. But this data addresses a professional one. Systemic bias in cardiac surgery costs lives because it prevents the best surgeons from practicing at their full capacity. Park flipped through the report, his editor's eye catching the devastating statistics immediately. These numbers, if accurate, this represents the largest documentation of medical field discrimination ever compiled. They're accurate, Amara replied. Every incident verified. Every statistic peer-reviewed. I've spent 18 months building an unassailable case. Surgeon General Okonkwo set down her copy of the report with deliberate care. Dr. Sterling, if you present this data alongside the Sterling Protocol, you're not just changing surgical practice, you're challenging the entire structure of medical hierarchy. Yes, Amara agreed simply. That's precisely the point. The lights dimmed at precisely 10 a.m. 1,200 cardiac surgeons settled into their seats. Programs rustling, conversations fading. The registration incident had already circulated through the conference like a rapidly metastasizing rumor. Dr. Pemberton sat in row M, seat 14, his face still flushed with shame. Around him, colleagues who'd witnessed the confrontation whispered speculation about what would happen next. The main screen illuminated with a single image, a human heart, mid-beat, captured in stunning 4K clarity during live surgery. Dr. Helena Vasquez took the podium, her voice amplified across the vast space. Distinguished colleagues, it is my profound honor to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Amara Sterling graduated summa cum laude from Johns Hopkins Medical School, completed her residency at Massachusetts General, and her fellowship in pediatric cardiac surgery at Stanford. The slide changed. Amara's credentials appeared. 14 patents, 73 published papers, the Denton Cooley Award, fellowship in the American College of Surgeons, board certification in 3 subspecialties. She has performed over 2,000 cardiac surgeries, with complication rates 89% below national averages. Her work on minimally invasive congenital repair has been adopted by 147 hospitals across 23 countries. And this morning, Vasquez paused for effect. Some of you mistook her for housekeeping staff. The audience stirred uncomfortably. Pemberton sank lower in his seat. Which brings us, Vasquez continued, to the real question. Not how we failed to recognize expertise, but why we failed. Dr. Amara Sterling, Amara walked onto the stage in a spotlight that seemed to render her incandescent. Her charcoal suit had been replaced by surgical scrubs, not as costume, but as statement. She was a surgeon first, a speaker second. "Good morning," she began, her voice filling the ballroom without seeming to strain. "I'm Dr. Amara Sterling, and yes, 2 hours ago, I was told to use the service entrance." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. "But let's talk about hearts instead of hurt feelings. Because what I'm about to show you will save more lives than any apology ever could." The screen behind her transformed. Surgical footage began playing. A live congenital heart repair. Using the Sterling protocol, the camera angle provided perfect visualization of the minimally invasive approach, the specialized instruments, the precision of every movement. This is Mia Chen, age 7, diagnosed with tetralogy of Fallot. Traditional open-heart surgery would require cracking her sternum, 6 to 8 weeks recovery, significant scarring, and elevated infection risk. The footage showed Amara's gloved hands working through a small incision, instruments moving with balletic precision. The Sterling protocol uses 4 micro-incisions, each less than 2 centimeters. Total procedure time, 2.3 hours. Recovery time, 8 days. Scarring, minimal. Mortality risk, reduced by 73%. The audience leaned forward collectively. This was why they'd come. Not for political correctness, but for medical advancement that saved lives. Mia Chen went home 9 days post-surgery. She's now playing competitive soccer. Traditional open-heart surgery would have sidelined her for 6 months minimum. The applause started hesitantly, then built. Surgeons understood what they were seeing. A genuine breakthrough that would change practice standards globally. "But here's what I need you to understand," Amara continued, her tone shifting. "The Sterling protocol almost didn't exist." The screen changed again, this time showing rejection letters. Dozens of them. When I first proposed this technique during my fellowship at Stanford, my research was rejected by 7 major grant committees. The feedback was consistent. Insufficient evidence of viability. Too experimental. Lacks institutional backing. She clicked to the next slide. Emails with identifying information redacted, but comments visible. Perhaps Dr. Sterling should focus on more conventional approaches before attempting innovation. This candidate shows promise, but may benefit from additional mentorship before leading original research. Recommend assigning to Dr. Sterling as surgical assistant rather than primary investigator. Every one of these rejections, Amara said quietly, came from committees that approved similar experimental protocols proposed by my male colleagues. The only variable was who was asking. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It took me 4 years to secure funding. 4 years of being told my technique was too risky, too unproven, too ambitious. In those 4 years, 1,247 children died from complications of traditional open-heart surgery for conditions the Sterling protocol could have treated. She let that number hang in the air like a diagnosis, which brings me to the second part of today's presentation. The Sterling protocol solves a medical problem, but medicine has another problem that kills just as certainly. Systematic discrimination that prevents talented physicians from reaching their full potential. The screen shifted to statistical analysis. Charts showing publication rates, grant approvals, promotion timelines, surgical opportunity allocation, all broken down by race and gender. For 18 months, I've been documenting these disparities across cardiac surgery in North America. The data is peer-reviewed, methodology is transparent, findings are devastating. Margaret Whitmore, watching from the VIP section, realized this was the announcement Chen had mentioned. Amara wasn't just presenting a surgical technique. She was launching a systematic reform initiative. Black physicians represent 5% of cardiac surgeons, but receive 1.3% of research grants. Female cardiac surgeons publish at rates equal to male colleagues, but receive 23% fewer citations. Physicians of color report discrimination incidents at rates 847% higher than white physicians. Pemberton, still sitting in row M, felt every eye in his section turn toward him. This morning's registration incident, Amara continued, wasn't an isolated event. It's a pattern, a systematic pattern that costs lives because it prevents the best surgeons from practicing optimally. She clicked to a new slide. The Sterling Initiative for Equity in Cardiac Surgery, effective immediately. I'm establishing a foundation with $15 million in initial funding to support 3 goals. First, grants for underrepresented surgeons developing innovative techniques. Second, mentorship programs, pairing junior physicians of color with senior surgical leaders. Third, systematic bias training for all cardiac surgery departments in participating hospitals. The audience erupted in applause, but Amara held up her hand. There's one more thing you should know. This morning, Margaret Whitmore and I finalized an agreement. American Medical Systems, all 247 hospitals, will implement mandatory bias prevention protocols across their cardiac surgery departments. Whitmore stood in the VIP section, confirming with a nod. Any hospital in the AMS network that shows statistically significant disparities in surgical opportunities, promotions, or publication support will face mandatory review and correction. We're not asking for fairness. We're requiring it. The applause transformed into a standing ovation. Not everyone stood. Some physicians remained seated, arms crossed, unconvinced. But the majority recognized what they were witnessing. The transformation of a registration desk, humiliation into systematic institutional change. 6 months later, Dr. Amara Sterling stood in the surgical observation gallery at Seattle Presbyterian, watching a resident named Maria Rodriguez perform her first Sterling protocol procedure on a 5-year-old with a ventricular septal defect. Maria's hands moved with careful precision through the minimally invasive approach. Guided by the senior attending, she was one of 47 residents who had received Sterling Initiative grants this year. Physicians who might never have gotten research opportunities under the old system. Dr. Sterling, Jennifer Liu appeared at her elbow, no longer working registration, but now coordinating the Sterling Initiative's fellowship program. We just received confirmation. Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and Cleveland Clinic have all adopted the mandatory bias prevention protocols. That brings us to 89 major cardiac surgery departments. Amara nodded, watching Maria successfully complete the critical repair. And the discrimination incident reporting system? Live across all participating hospitals. We've documented and addressed 127 incidents in the past 6 months. None escalated because intervention happened immediately. Below in the operating room, Maria closed the final incision. Total procedure time, 2 hours, 18 minutes. The patient's vitals remain stable throughout. She's gifted, Amara observed. She almost quit after her intern year, Jennifer revealed. Said she was tired of being told to fetch coffee when she was presenting grand rounds. The Sterling Initiative mentorship program convinced her to stay. Amara smiled slightly. Then we've already succeeded. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Pemberton. Sterling protocol outcomes published in NEJM this morning. Citation rates already breaking records. Thank you for not giving up on us. She didn't reply immediately. Some lessons took time to absorb fully. Instead, she watched Maria Rodriguez complete her first successful cardiac surgery using a technique that almost didn't exist because committees couldn't see past their own bias. Dr. Sterling? Jennifer asked. The Seattle Times wants to do a feature on the registration incident anniversary. They're calling it the confrontation that changed cardiac surgery. Amara shook her head. Tell them to interview Dr. Rodriguez instead. The real story isn't what happened to me at registration. It's what happens next, when we create systems where talent is recognized, regardless of who's carrying it.